You want the yeah, they made the assumption that we're Americans, this is what we want to go see. We didn't.
That's funny.
Yeah. Hey, Aaron.
Hi, Mark. Welcome.
Thank you.
Let's see here. Share my screen. And what else should I do here? Okay, we usually wait till about, I don't know, 12:35 to get started. So we'll just wait patiently for folks to join. Welcome, everyone, as you're joining. Thanks for coming. We'll get started in about 5 minutes. Welcome, folks. We'll get started in about 3 more minutes. Give folks time to get on and maybe finish their lunch. And I had to tease you, Michael. And give folks a chance to run from other meetings as well.
Yep.
Everyone enjoying the second winter here in Pittsburgh?
Love the snow. It's a nice April Fool's Day joke.
Wasn't it though? I can't believe it's still stuck. So for folks just joining us, we'll get started in about a minute.
Hello.
Hello, welcome. Okay, let's get started. Hi everyone, welcome to the Torus community meeting in April. My name is Erin Serwinski. I'm the manager of learning engineering at Open Learning Initiative, as well as the product manager for the Open Simon Toolkit. I'm here today as monthly. We come together to talk about the new system we're developing and hopefully getting a lot of good input from everyone here. It's very informal. Feel free to interrupt me, or most of it will be discussions. So I'm just going to go through a few little slides, probably show off a little bit of Torus to get a sense of what we're talking about, and then I want to hear from all of you about your design processes. Essentially, that's what we're going to be doing today. So let's get started. So I've worked across many different platforms and teams to develop online courses and content. And I've had very different experiences given what we had in terms of tools, expertise, and comfort level with tech. You know, is depending on the kind of team you put together to design online course materials. And I've learned to kind of roll with whatever tools are given me and structure a team according to their strengths. However, I have to admit, no tool that I've ever worked on has encompassed everything needed to support design tasks in a consistent and comprehensive manner. So for any of you who have done design for online courses or any kind of courses, you probably work at a number of different tools because of the different tasks that need to be done, right? And so I'm not promising that Torus will encompass everything that we want, but we have an opportunity here to talk through what it looks like to go through the design process and what capabilities make sense to develop in our new tool. And so I'm going to describe the overall process that I tend to use or that I've experienced, and hopefully hear from all of you about your different experiences in terms of designing online content. And so this diagram is the backwards design diagram we use often. Most of you are probably familiar with it. You know, we do goal setting and model development, you know, coming up with the learning objectives and skills and knowledge components needed for the students to attain mastery of, and then think about the types of assessments and activities that will support students in attaining that mastery of those outcomes. And then, you know, look to do careful, detailed page design, multimedia design, and all along, hopefully taking in data that will help inform our decision making as we go through the different things we want to build. So what this breaks down to essentially is a list of tasks that happen over the course of a development process. So, you know, I've had experience doing text selection and getting whatever text you're using. If it's something that's like OER content, open educational resource content, that's really a popular way that I've designed courses using that content from, say, an OpenStax text or some other text that's open. You know, how do you get that into the tool and thinking through that process, going through the model development, the learning objectives and the skill mapping, developing activities and assessments, And the way we do it at OLI is developing not just a single question and some answers, but all of the hints and feedback that go into that. And then that whole writing and reviewing and commenting iteration cycle. So getting others to review the work and comment on it, resolving those comments, making sure you make decisions about what goes in or doesn't into a particular module or course. And that can look different depending on whether you're starting from scratch or if you're starting from existing content and needing to revise and do all of that review cycle and revisions on existing content that's already in a course. There's that tagging that we do at OLI to make sure that the content, the assessments, the activities are tagged with the learning objectives so that we can follow that data through to see if students are mastering those outcomes. And then using that same data to iterate on those designs once we have them. And then there's all this other stuff that you have to think about when you're developing content, especially with large teams of different folks. So, style guides, making sure that there's a similar voice across a whole course. If you have people designing different portions of it, making sure you're consistent in like naming conventions and things like that. Being able to enable collaboration, having multiple people working in the same course at the same time or doing different things as part of that design process. And then there's all the project management, tracking, change tracking. How do you know when, especially if you're working with a team, what's been changed and how that affects maybe other design decisions downstream. So these are all the types of tasks that I could think of when I am trying to set up a new design project. And so I want to hear from all of you all and see if this resonates, if this is similar. Is there anything else that I didn't consider in this long list of things? And believe me, I have longer lists, more detailed lists to share. But ultimately, I want to hear from you with these ideas in mind. So when you're designing courses, what are your points of friction in your current processes? What are the best ways to facilitate that backwards design? How do you do that learning model design, coming up with the learning objectives and skills and knowledge components? Where do you do this work? That's really a lot of what I'm interested in hearing. I know we tend to do a lot in Google Docs because it allows you that free flow of multiple people in there writing and reviewing and commenting and resolving comments. And I can imagine we're not going to rebuild Google Docs into our Torus platform, but where do those lines? Think about where those lines are drawn. What makes sense to build into the tool, and then what supports are needed to facilitate things like accessibility and multimedia design. Sorry, I keep going back. And then what types of tools, review tools, analytics. We have the ability to build in rubrics for design, like, maybe doing a quality matters audit might help. And I don't know if I should stop there or if I should show you a little bit of Torus. Let's maybe talk a little bit first and tell me before I show you anything, what are your pain points around design? What are the things that you would love to see facilitated better than any tool that you've seen so far?
May I jump in?
Absolutely, Peter.
The one thing that I'm looking for is a data dashboard that is intuitive for people who are not data dashboard or data familiar. There's a big gap between what we think educators should have in terms of access to data and the levels of data literacy, particularly with data literacy tools. So I know I'm preaching to the choir on that one, but that's something that I just felt that really, because I've yet to see any kind of learning system that really does it, that really makes me feel, aha, they got it. This is it. This is what it looks like. So those are my 2 cents.
That's an excellent point. And we've been thinking a lot about that. Maybe there's some way to facilitate the design for folks who don't do design very deeply, but then have a set of tools that are maybe, that are standard versus, learning engineering, deep dive tools, things like that. So that's a great point that we're wanting to consider for sure. I'm watching the chat a little bit here. Updating, correcting items. Yeah. And do you mean items by anything in the course, or do you mean particularly activities and assessments, Bonnie?
I mean, anything that we find, that we would cross out of a textbook because we can't fix it, but we would never use it again. I'd like to be able to correct things that are obviously not working properly, either rewriting or correcting something that was logged incorrectly as an answer.
And how do you do that now?
We do not. Sebastian can answer, but we keep a log, and at some point somebody tries. I don't know, Sebastian.
Yeah, the process has been to keep a log of either authors who use the course or users who have a pretty heavy usage rate. So, for example, if you have an entire institution, they have, I don't know, 200 students in a course, you get a lot of, it's crowdsourcing error identification at this point, where you get so many users through with one point person, then we get, these pages of, okay, this doesn't work, there's a typo there, and then once a year, we just go and fix it all up and then redeploy.
Yeah, that sounds similar to what I'm trying to put in place as well, where where I use a myriad of tools. I'll use, say, a Google form to allow folks to log errors as they find them. And then that populates a spreadsheet where then, I go through and categorize what those errors are, because, there's typos, but then there's things that might need subject matter expertise. There might be things that are technology related, that the tech isn't working in some way, or just, things where a learning engineer or instructional designer needs to, go in there and figure things out a little bit more. And so I tend to, create this big spreadsheet and then categorize those things so that I can divvy up the content. And you guys have a little bit of different process. You look at all the errors and you fix them yourselves, but because you have the subject matter expertise.
Right.
Yeah, I can definitely understand that it's not an easy process at the moment.
Well, I have the floor, if I may. One of the challenges I find in developing sort of large scale courses, by large scale I mean it's not larger scale than anything, but when you start having multiple authors over developing a 15-week or a 30-week sequence, one of the major, I understand that you can't really rebuild Google Docs into Torus. I think that's going to be illusory. So, but having a clear and flexible way to handle asset management would be great, where because the hardest part sometimes with the team is to get everybody to label their stuff the same way, so that whoever is doing the building or troubleshooting can actually find them easily, and so having ways to decide on names and where things rearranging or creating buckets where the assets can live and things like this would be a great. You already have that part, but in terms of nomenclature and all that stuff, I think that to me is really important. As far as the multimedia goes, we're already running into obstacles trying to transition our courses into. We were talking with Judy and Martin about this yesterday. To find having flexible ways to chunk video, for example, in the playback form, which seems to continually be a problem, where you can get sometimes we want students to go back and just play 1.5 seconds of a video, and we can find a start point but not an end point, and so then all of a sudden there's all kinds of things that we no longer can do. So making sure that everything related to, if you really want things that are efficiently and efficaciously multimodal, then the platform needs to be able to handle multimodality in very, very flexible kinds of way, and granular, I suppose.
Right. You're talking about being able to create like snippets from larger
Mhm.
videos, things like that.
Yeah, and also making sure we don't have to actually create the snippets, but be able to use the full video with certain stop points. We can do that in the existing, the XML-based version of OLI, but going forth when we're transitioning from local hosting of the video to YouTube hosting or other streaming services, we have that issue of what we do now we can't do in YouTube. And we also have the fact that YouTube has a naming structure that has no relation to the content.
Mm.
Now, I have a table that I'm setting up for our current development where this is our name for it. This is what the YouTube URL is. This is what our developers are trying to call it.
Right. That's a good point.
They were talking about accessibility, so same thing, offering the level of granularity to where we can have functionalities that handle multiple languages. So if we want to caption an image using English, fine, but if we want to caption it in English or French or Chinese, then we need to be able to do this, so that a screen reader, for example, may be able to say in French, this is a picture of a bridge over the Seine River.
Right.
So some things like this.
Yeah, those
Which
are
is,
all.
I know it's transitioning from developing to use case, but it's all in that multimodality bucket.
Right. You guys in the languages tend to work with a lot of video, probably more than any other course development domains even. So it's certainly relevant to talk about that as part of design, because that's something you think about often and do often. So yeah, that's great. I'm looking back through the chat here. Rubrics, yeah. So Gautam, you wanna speak up and talk more about what you wrote here?
Yeah. So during my course design process, I will write all the assessment in Google Doc before the faculty can review it. But then I have to go and copy all the things into OLI. So sometimes I miss, like, do not select the correct choice, or miss some of the feedback,
Mm-hmm.
or maybe don't update and I don't remember. So if there is a way in which we can directly import a Google Doc in OLI so that all assessment are built, because I already built them in a specific format, that this is feedback, this is the question type, and this is the prompt. But if I can directly import it, then I think there will be less error and it will be less time consuming.
Thank you for talking through that. Yeah, we find that we do a lot of cutting and pasting, right? And that cutting and pasting has consequences. So yeah, that's a good one to recognize.
Can I expand on that a little?
Yes, please.
So I think that is a huge problem with what Gautam's saying, that we don't have a way to create like a draft within OLI. I think that would be very useful. In addition, we also don't have a real WYSIWYG environment in Echo currently, because the objectives and the assessments are separate from the instructional material, and then it's you know, I find when I'm building out a course, I'm jumping around from objectives to the page, to the assessment, and then adding the skills in there. And it's just, it would be so much nicer if it was all on the same interface.
Interesting. So you kind of almost need like a design interface that'll keep those things, and maybe, you know, I'm not trying to build the solution here, but just to get a better sense of what you think you would need.
Well, why? I can tell you exactly, because
Okay.
so I'm not shy. So let's take assessments, since that's you know, learn by doing. So that has its own editor, and it's not clear to me why that editor can't be embedded directly in the page itself. Yeah, I think that would be really, really helpful. And then I could see the learning objectives and the skills all on the same page.
Yeah.
And for the learning objectives, why can't I do an add new when I want to add a learning objective right on the page, as opposed to going back to the objectives and adding that in? That's you know, where these may seem like minor inconveniences, I find that I lose my train of thought or track where I am, and I can't even do things like right click and open a new tab for objectives. It doesn't let you do that, and you duplicate the tab, but sometimes Echo doesn't really appreciate that. So
Yeah, definitely. I'm imagining like very similar to what you're saying, you know, being able to author those assessments right in the page, but also having some window to be able to see the learning objectives all, you know, or manipulate even the learning objectives as you're doing the page.
well, in the same page, I mean, you certainly could have an add new, and maybe I click on a learning objective and I see the skills that are underneath it. And I can edit those right in the same page, just like it expands on it. You know, just like this is supposed to be an editor for a course. So having it all on one page, like it, where it ultimately ends up, and not jumping around from point to point, is what I'm asking for.
Yeah, and I have to tell you, you know, the reason Echo is the way it is today is because we were building it over that XML structure, right? Where the assessments were separate files, and so now it's a little clunky trying to design all that, design a page. But let me show you guys maybe some of what Torus is capable of today, and maybe that can help maybe expand our thinking a little bit. So let me do that. And of course, if anybody has anything else to add or say, please don't be shy. Feel free to chime in. But are you guys seeing my screen where it has details? And so I'm using this Cuisine of Northern Spain as an example course that actually Darren, our software engineer, built to try some things and test some things. I'm going to use it to kind of show you, because it has a lot of the cool features already that that I want to show off. So right now, this is the details, some things that you couldn't do before that make it a lot easier to do team collaboration design, is having this ability to invite collaborators right from this interface. So I can invite others either who have an account or don't have an account already, just by their email, to come and work in this course. And then there's just a lot of, you know, you'd be able to duplicate the course, do a data shop export. So these are just some of the things that we have in place now. The objectives, I don't know why I must have had this sitting up a little longer and timed out. But the learning objectives page, we're creating the ability to do any number of objectives and sub-objectives, and be able to tag really at any level is what we're thinking at the moment. And then there's the curriculum, and it's this list of pages, and pages can either be content pages with activities built in, or they can be graded assessment pages. So let me dive into one of these pages to show you a little bit more about the authoring. So a little bit of what Michael was saying, we do have the ability to do. So, you know, this is just text and images and different call outs, but the ability to edit those assessments or activities right in place, really right here in the page, not going out to a separate file and editing them there, but being able to see and where and what's involved. And again, still being able to all of the things that you can do with our current activities and getting the feedback.
You have to reset the activity.
Okay. Oh, it's a multiple choice, so yeah. So yeah. So these are just some of the things, again, being able to do all of that. I was even thinking even an expanded design view where you'd be able to see all of the hints and feedback together in one place would be nice, like a review mode, you know. So that's one page. Let me go to an assessment page. So again, it's very similar. It's designing a page just like any other, but it'd be a list of, you know, activity types essentially. And then when you select this as being a graded page, and you do that when you add the page. Let me here take off some of mine. Back to curriculum. When you select a page to be a quiz or a summative assessment, then that tells the application to, you know, create that in the grade book. So one of the other things we're doing with Torus is we're trying to not rebuild functionality that already exists really well in whatever LMS you're using, but to be more integrated with it. So in the case of grades, we are not building a grade book. We're building something that works with your LMS's grade book. Some other things, I'm just going to be doing a quick overview just so I can show you guys all the types of things that are in here. This is a review section where you can run this review on your course and see different types of reviews. So if you want to see accessibility prompts to say, well, there's not alt text on certain images, or there's not transcripts with certain videos, this could give you that list of things that are missing, items that make for good accessibility. And then right now we have a lightweight pedagogical audit as well that will tell you at least when you have activities that aren't attached to learning objectives or questions that aren't attached to learning objectives. Right now, this is the lightweight way we're doing it now, but we're thinking about all the different types of rubrics we could be building into this review process to see, you know, what other types of things you want to review as you're designing a course and wanting to know about things that are missing. And then just so you know, publishing is immediate. It's now, we've taken these separate systems that make up OLI now, OLI delivery, OLI authoring, and then the XML structure and SVN repository under that. All of that goes away. It's now one thing where you can actually make a change to your content, hit publish, and it publishes out to your course. So I could make a change to this right now. Let me go back to a page. I'll just go on the introduction. The system slow, and I want to change this to multiple exclamation points because I'm very excited that students are here and welcomed into the course. And it saves automatically. And I just have to move my Zoom windows around here and make sure I'm seeing this. And now when I go back to that publish, it's telling me what's changed and where. And by the way, let me go out to this is my Canvas instance that has the course already out there and running. And just give me a moment to, so here's the course. I'm looking at the introduction, it has 1 exclamation point. Now when I go here and publish, I'll probably refresh, and now it's right there. So immediate changes to typos and things like that would be possible now. What else? Insights. So we're having some of the same types of analytics that we have in Echo Now. This one is a way to view the different types of questions that are in this course. And, you know, we've had some folks run through this as students. And so we've collected some data against each question. So telling us how many attempts how many students have worked with that question, how many get it eventually correct, how many get it on the first time. This is some low level, you know, analytics to give you a sense of, you know, where the difficulties are for your students. And this would help with iterative improvement. So once your students running through, to be able to see this data and say, oh, well, maybe places where students aren't doing so well are getting to eventually correct, or places I want to prioritize some iterative improvement on. Let's see. Anyone else? Greg, anything I've missed that I should show off that you think?
I think that's the main stuff. I mean, note that this is kind of an open beta. We have some functionality, but not all.
Mm-hmm.
Particularly like this insights page is something we imagine getting really beefed up in the future and becoming, you know, like a really powerful tool. And then in curriculum, maybe just show editing an assessment, because we want the yeah. So like on a given page, it looks very more WYSIWYG-ish, right? This is what it would look like in a published mode. But if you want to edit a specific activity, you do still kind of click the big yellow button. Yellow. Yep.
I see.
Yeah. And this is where, and then maybe click on a learning objective in there. This might, nope, this might address one of Michael's questions. I think that you can make new ones right when you make the quiz question. Yeah. Create new objective.
Well, I have too many.
Can I put a skill under that too? Just to say, and
I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know if that's exactly here yet, but I think that
if you make a new,
I see.
Yeah, if you make a new question, it gives you this more like drop down, choose which objective you want. But yeah, I think some of your concerns are already kind of addressed in here. What do you think?
yeah, looks good.
Yeah, this is a way where you can see that's the challenge in putting this all. If we had a whole page, I'm just thinking through this out loud, really, what would be better? So if I had a whole page of a bunch of questions, and this is one question, right, with all of this feedback and hints, and by the way, I don't know if you've noticed, but there's also Peter to address one of your questions or comments. We're trying to put a little bit more support in how to best, you know, select these types of things. So when you're creating feedback, you know, making sure that it's reinforcing their understanding. Types of hints, you know, we do first hint, cognitive hints, bottom out hints, deer headlights hints. We're trying to, and again, this is just, you know, beginning stages of building out this tool. But we are trying to think about different pedagogical guidance we can give for folks who aren't learning engineers or instructional designers.
So what would it take for what Gautam said, if we all do our questions in Google Docs in a standard format, to create a script that can read those in and create questions for us?
So we also are thinking about different types of ingestion tools, right? Different ways that we can ingest content more easily into this. And so we're building this, whereas that's kind of an afterthought for Echo. It's a forethought. It's something we're actively thinking about. We have this whole ingest section, and we'll be building this out. So your idea of being able to ingest a Google Doc to build an assessment is something we could certainly consider, if that's what you use. And that's part of what this discussion is about. Like, what other tools do you guys use and why? You know, that we might want to consider building more of that functionality in here rather than having you go out to external tools. And Michael Feldstein's here. Michael, you have something to say? You have a hand up?
I just have a question following up on Ricardo's question in chat. And this is, forgive me, this is just a little bit off topic from the designing outside of Torus, but I'm curious, since he brought it up, whether there are other folks who have concerns about layout authoring and complex layouts of page designs.
We do.
Yeah, that's a nice question, Michael.
Us too.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, I don't want to derail your agenda, Aaron, but at some point in some meeting, if you wanted to tee that up, I'd be curious to hear more about that.
So to talk a little bit more about that, Michael, I might have misunderstood. So are you talking about, can you explain a little bit more?
Yeah, so even in Torus right now, which is I think a big step forward from Echo visual authoring, it's very sort of linear, blocky on the page.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I'm curious about that's easier to use at a cost, and I'm curious about, you know, the appetite for an editor that's somewhat more complex, but where you can drag things around, create multiple columns, and you know, basically a full-on drag and drop visual editor.
I see. And so something that we think about in terms of that as well is, are there different types of content that you would like to be able to tag to learning outcomes that you can't now? So I think I'm just imagining one of the reasons for the blockish type content is so we could actually like tag certain content to learning outcomes and start to track a little more than just activities. Is that something that would be interesting to people? Should we weigh that in terms of complex design and being able to do that? I'm not saying both can't be done at the same time. But I think that's the thinking sometimes behind this block approach.
Why couldn't you tie the tagging of the learning analytics to specific blocks on the page, or to a group of blocks or something like this? So like, let's say you have an image, and then you have a second column with the text next to it as opposed to below it, or things are not always the same size. And I'm not sure I understand why this cannot be, each of these little boxes wouldn't be able to be tied to learning checks and things like this.
Yeah, I think that's the case that we're trying to get towards. I guess I'm saying there's a payoff if it's very free flowing, say, then you wouldn't be able to necessarily do that as easily. I think here I have something from.
Yeah, Eli makes a good point about the mobile friendly nature of things, but
yeah. Thanks, Eli.
Yeah, and it's not just mobile friendly, it's also accessible. I believe in the SUNY Oscar rubric, there's some language in there, which for those who don't know, the Oscar rubric is a online course evaluation rubric. There's some language in there about consistency between courses. And so, there's, for those that are familiar with something like, well, I guess Smart Sparrow is now a Pearson product, but Smart Sparrow had lots of flexibility, and you could build these really like immersive, interactive, complex experiences. But some of those come at the cost of less accessible and then less standardized, which can between courses can make it a little hard to track. Like you may not always know what to expect. Whereas this, yes, it's more simple in this current format, but that simplicity does have some benefits. Like,
And I think that doesn't mean we can't do things like, I think what you guys are saying really is being able to manipulate an actual page design, at the same time you're trying to also think about, how these different pieces get students to mastery. So I can completely resonate with the request for more ability to do columns and layouts where you can have, an image beside text. Is that the sort of thing, Sebastian, you were maybe referring to as well?
Yeah, exactly. Or even having activities where students could put type in different columns. For example, say you need to sort out elements of a text according to categories of speech, for example, or things like this. So then, having the ability to envision a visual layout that would be pleasing and easy to navigate. But in addition to mobile, Greg, you made a good point about accessibility. If a screen reader, for example, is not able to keep up with this kind of layout, then we're having a problem, because we need to find something that they can deal with. But yeah, it's exactly the kind of thing, not only in the presentation, but in the kinds of activities we can put in front of students to do, and how they can interact with the material.
That's great. Norm joins us. Hi, Norm.
Hey, yeah. So I think there are two pieces that I'd add to this discussion. One is that I think, as many of you know, we've got a really fabulous partnership with the ETX Center at ASU around Torus, as they work to migrate what had been Smart Sparrow content, Greg happened to reference earlier, into a new platform, and that new platform will be Torus. As that collaboration has evolved, we've headed to a place where we will have this notion of adaptive pages, what we were originally calling adaptive pages, but we're now sort of calling expert user pages, where you have a great deal more control over things like layout and structure down to the nitty-gritty of manipulating the CSS, and and this also is going to give you some abilities for adaptivity and variables and things. But for most of our users, we imagine a simpler simple editor. So you can imagine that you're offered the simple editor as an early user, which gives you some basic capabilities, and you can at any point move to that expert editor, which gives you the expanded set of capabilities, which might include manipulating some of these layout pieces. This is important to us for a couple of reasons. One of them is that we had originally discussed that adaptive page as a distinct activity type, which means that there was not an easy transition path, and which was also going to mean a multitude of authoring systems. Under the model we're now pursuing, if you're working on a simple page, and you realize after getting it out in front of students that you need to do something more sophisticated, you simply turn on the expert editor, and you don't need to migrate the content. It's right there. So I think that this is going to give us the opportunity to experiment a little more deeply when our folks need greater control over presentation, whether because there's an obvious use for it, obvious need for it, or because you want to experiment a little bit. You've got a notion that a different set of presentation is going to give these components to your learners in a way that's a little more amiable to knowledge creation. doing this in a way that is going to be consistent and coherent with the requirements of accessibility is going to be a challenge for us, though, both both from a responsive design and an accessibility standpoint. I was in 2 meetings this week with institutions that have told me that it's becoming just absolutely critical for our technology, for all educational technology, to be in compliance with the latest set of I'm going to get the acronym not wrong, WCAG guidelines, which are up to now 2.1. And thanks, Michael, WCAG. I was close. And that so it creates an interesting element for us, right? We want to be compliant because it's the right thing to do, but we also want to be compliant because we're told that we're nearer to compliance than many other ed tech approaches and products that are out there. And so we have obviously, as Carnegie Mellon, have a competitive streak in us, and we want to be out in front and be the best. So I think that's one piece of this. And I don't know that we'll ever get that balance perfect, but we're going to keep on working on it, and our partners are going to be working on it. So Judy, I agree that we need to be compliant with legislative requirements, but I think that the WCAG 2.1 are a set of guidelines that cover both compliance and additional elements that aren't legally required, but I think that we have an obligation to head towards. So I agree that we must be compliant with ADA requirements, but we aspire to be as compliant as we can with emerging guidelines. And I think that's one of the interesting things about accessibility, right? That if you're doing it right, there's not a point where you just check the box and say, okay, we're done, right? I think that as learning engineers and learning scientists, we recognize that what the standards are and what best practices are keep changing, and we need to keep staying in front of them. But Sebastian, you raised a second question there about new kinds of activity types. And I think that this is a place where we want to be, so Torus is going to make it much easier to create new activity types that can be easily plugged in. And I think that as a community, trying to understand how do we evaluate these once they've had their chance to be out in front of learners, and how do we start to think about how these new activities migrate from an experimental activity to something that becomes part of the native activity set, part of what we just described as the basic editing set of tools, is not something that we have a great handle on now, in part because the system in the past it hasn't made it easy to create those new kinds of activities. And so as we see this increase in activities, or as we hope to see an increase in activities because Torus makes it easier, we're also going to need to be a little more serious about how that stuff starts to get rolled into the core of the system. And so one of the purposes that these community meetings serve is one piece of the larger puzzle for road mapping Torus and thinking about governance. So hope that was helpful and a useful contribution. Sorry, running at the mouth.
It's okay. Thanks, Norm.
Hey, can I add something or question to Norm?
Sure.
So I won't even wait for the answer. I'll just do it. And yeah, I have programming examples, sandboxes that Harley and I figured out today that we can add as quote new activity types because I wanted to associate skills with them. The way I did that was I did a, what was it, the drag and drop, or I just basically faked an object and added a web page into the assessment. And so now I can link at least the activity to a skill, but I can't, it's obviously not going to get evaluated. It's more like a submit and compare, which is better than nothing, but it's it's not ideal. So, yeah, I mean, I think there's almost a way to do it already.
Yeah, I think that we're near there. I think that we have two different pieces here, and one of them is going to be a really easy way to plug in activities via LTI, which is we're much closer to on the roadmap. The second is being able to publish a toolkit for new activity development, right? And that's really having an appropriate SDK, and it's having the appropriate examples and documentation in place. Because that is so when we think about legacy OLI, we have a number of super activities or custom activities that already exist. And this new activity SDK is the way that we're going to integrate those. So we're just, placing a priority on getting that SDK in place and in getting the right documentation in place is absolutely essential for us. And I think if the LTI piece doesn't give you that last step that you're looking for, then this SDK is going to get you there.
Okay, cool.
Anyone else have some thoughts? Judy, not to put you on the spot, but are there things that you and your team find that you can't do that you'd like to be able to do? In terms of designing courses and your processes?
Sorry.
It's okay.
Did you hear? Okay. I thought my computer was open and it was closed, so you couldn't hear my muffled voice. Yeah, so I think everybody has already covered most of the concerns that we have. I think Michael laid out a few good ones that we've probably stated in the past as well. So I resonate with those points. With the points that have been given, I mean, really just the ease of interacting, to collaborate, to develop the courses online, all those points have been covered. I do resonate with the difficulty around maintaining accessibility, compliance, responsive web, and giving flexibility to the design. It's an extremely difficult design problem, as we've tried to do over the course of the years, but also a good challenge. I'm not seeing a gap, unless a member of the team wants to speak on their own behalf here, and what's been described already. These priorities are among our priorities as well.
Great, thanks. How about any new folks that have joined? We've been talking about design processes, and I've started out, talking about how I've yet to find one tool that encompasses all the different things that you have to do as part of the design process. What are some tools? What are some of your go-to tools for design outside of Google Docs? So we've heard Google Docs. We've heard a little bit about video development. What are some other things that you guys have found you need to do on a regular basis that you have to, and what's your go-to tool for it? What about team development? Maybe something around that. Where are some of the points in friction when you have a large group of people all working on the same course? I know Sebastian covered a little bit of that earlier, but we have some new folks to the group since then.
I can't believe Judy's not piping up here, because she's a stickler making sure we use the alignment spreadsheet when we build out our courses. It's actually very useful, but don't tell her I said that.
I think though some of the things you're asking for, Michael, I agree. We have an alignment spreadsheet that we use as a Google Sheet. It supports the backwards design process, but I think some of the requests you had earlier, Michael, to have some of that stuff co-located on a page, I think at the big picture level, that spreadsheet will still be useful.
Oh,
But
yeah.
it's really getting addressed also at a local view in some of the design requests you put in the thread here today, and that I think we're seeing developed, so that you can start to see that. One of our big things is having co-located on the page when we're collaborating, the learning objective and the skills right next to the thing that the students will be interacting with, either the learn by doing or whatever the activity is, so that we're seeing that alignment as we're designing, and we're able to check it and comment on it. So I feel like some of that's being put into the system, so that's why I'm not emphasizing it as much.
Right. But thanks, Michael, for that idea as well. I should take a look at that and see if there's some way we can facilitate that alignment building. Dave, you have some things to say?
Yeah, sorry I was late, so I didn't see everything. But
Okay.
there was a time when there was an easy way for someone using the course to say, "Oh, error! Like I think there's an error here, there's an error there," and then that would be put into a spreadsheet, and they could all go back and fix them. It doesn't even have to be the students. We have like about 15 faculty that are helping build it, and lots of errors in the first draft. Then there's this spreadsheet, but it's a little hard to organize all the sort of little fixes. And it would be really convenient to be able to like scroll through the course and look and
Yeah.
see all the corrections.
Right. Yeah, you might have missed it when I said I actually described my process. It's a Google form and a spreadsheet, and then I categorize all the errors so that I can divvy them up because different people will be fixing them, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, I hear you there. Be able to resolve.
Yeah, the bigger the team is, the harder that gets to manage, you know.
Yeah. Right. Where I'm actually curious is when you need to revise material in an already existing course, can someone describe like how you do that? How you get the material reviewed and then comments on what needs to change? Can anyone describe what that looks like right now? You guys don't do that?
Well, we've had this issue. So we have, we're trying to get people to more use the authoring tools, but we're definitely in the Google Doc phase. And then it's mostly people writing extra quiz questions. Our main goal is to like triple the number of questions we have. And so, and there's a stage of writing them in Google, and then people comment on them in Google, and then they get transferred in. And I think Sandy would really like to see that transfer not be necessary anymore. And we're having the same thing in Gradescope. The first time we wrote the exams in Gradescope, we wrote them in Google Docs, and we tried to move them into Gradescope. And we've just switched to let's just write them in Gradescope because you make extra errors as you're moving them.
Yeah. Gautam had said that earlier, that when you're cutting and pasting things from different documents, there's definitely more room for error.
Yeah.
What about chunks of content? I'm finding that, you know, when we want to do an iterative improvement on, say, our psychology course, I mean, it's huge, right? And to get all of that content reviewed and commented on in a way where subject matter experts can say, okay, this needs to be updated, and here's the update. Right now, yeah, we've been using Google Docs and cutting and pasting. Because of, David, to your point, that review process that needs to happen too. We don't always just say, okay, whatever this one person said automatically goes in. We want some way of like vetting it, right?
Yeah, in Google Docs, it does have this problem. I hate using it for formatted stuff, just in general too, because it's so like, who knows where it puts figures, you know? And the share LaTeX, I guess, but now it's called something else. But the LaTeX editors have all the features of Google Docs, you know, editing and commenting, good versioning. But because it's just standard ASCII, it's kind of smoother. And I wonder, so I think that I like that better than the WYSIWYG stuff almost, because at least the cut and paste becomes negligible, but you're also not building some sort of fancy tool that knows the syntax. It's more just, you know, a good versioned collaborative ASCII. Is there something like, is there some, I know that if you know the XML, it's not too, sometimes it's easier just to edit the XML, right? But then is there a collaborative thing that's in Overleaf, I think is what Share LaTeX came. Is there something like an Overleaf Google Doc for XML?
I don't know. I'll have to look into that. I don't know those applications. I know that we've recently started using Hypothesis, which is a web annotator tool to help have reviewers review course pages and add comments or point out errors. And I have to say, we're just starting using that. I mean, I'm just trying to solve the problem of getting good review comments on existing content. The next step is for me to figure out, okay, now what do I do with those comments and how do I get changes as a result of them? But that's been a pretty useful tool. It's an overlay over.
A friend of mine recommended that, so I'll have to check it out. You're the second person now to bring that up.
Yeah, you know, it took someone else had recommended it to me, and then I think it was SUNY, someone in SUNY, one of the professors were talking about using it in classrooms, and then it was actually Norm that suggested I try it for review. I hadn't thought of it, so someone needed to point it out to me twice too.
Does it as an overlay? Does it overlay on OLI?
Yeah, any web page.
Oh, wow.
And then it puts all the comments in a nice list in Hypothesis. So you can go, you can create groups and things like that. I'm not here trying to promote Hypothesis, but that's I'm finding it. I'm just learning about it and using it, and it's working out so far.
I guess the other thing that's coming, we're with Nabora, we have a project we're trying to do adaptive, and what's the timeline for adaptive, or if this is too off topic?
I'm not aware of the exact timeline for that. Norm talked a little bit about it being. Norm, you talked a little bit about that earlier. Maybe David wasn't here yet.
I mean, the short answer is it depends on what you mean by adaptive, right? Isn't that always the case? The longer answer is that we will have some examples of adaptive pages in use to support the ETX ASU use cases for the summer, and in a way that they could probably be used and developed during summer school of this year. And obviously there are a number of paths towards adaptivity. Are we thinking about integrating CTAT as an adaptive path? Are we looking at the kind of adaptivity John Stamper and his folks been building? But this broader set of adaptive pages that'll support multiple use cases, we'll start to see some availability over the summer. You have a slightly different question though, which is, if we're simply supporting adaptivity in Torus, but we don't have the other pieces that will allow chemistry to migrate, you don't necessarily have the full toolkit. So you need both of those pieces. And I think chemistry is probably closer to a December, the December release to be able to be migrated, although don't hold me to that. One quick note, since I'm seeing Hypothesis bubble up in the chats, and I also want to acknowledge Daniel's suggestion for Figma boards, that we have sort of two ways to think about these design features. And one of them is, what are the kinds of things that for a smooth flow really need to be integrated as part of Torus's core functionality. But the second is, where are there places where there are tools that are already so good that we don't need or would not want to recreate them? And if so, what degree of integration do we want to pursue? And so I suspect Figma boards is in that category. with a tool like Hypothesis, as folks try this and start experimenting with it, rather than needing to go all or nothing on recreating or fully embedding its collaborative features, if you start to use it and say, hey, this is good, but a little bit more integration would get us a little more utility, keeping us informed on that, letting us know whether that's in these meetings or giving us a call or dropping us an email or, in some distant dreamlike land, perhaps stopping by the office and talking. Because you can imagine a thing like Hypothesis. Right now, we're using it with no lift on an integration, we're just using it as designed. But a little bit of a lift would start to get you a little more capability, and we could keep pushing on that on the publishing and design side. Which part? Iterative and incremental improvement, or seeing each other face to face?
Being together in an office.
Yeah.
Yeah, Norm, if I might follow up on that just a little bit. I think when you're thinking about tools, I think it's important to consider where these tools live. If OLI is your be all end all for everything you're going to deliver online, that's one thing. If you're using it incorporated in a learning management system, then you're going to want to plug your tools in the best flow of use for the students. So where does the tool live in terms of in terms of when students are interacting with it and the goals it's fulfilling? Is it supposed to be embedded in an activity in OLI, and why? So are we thinking of solely fully online courses, or are we talking about remote where you still have some face-to-face time? So I think we need to dig in on the requirements around tools in there and why they're embedded in OLI versus connected to a broader ecosystem for the course.
Great point.
Maybe an easy low-hanging fruit on that would be the clicker system that OLI students would log in to. It'd mostly be for analytics of seeing like how do they answer these questions in class. Right now, I just switch to Zoom polls because they're the easiest, but not getting any data from it. And
yeah, that's good suggestions as well.
Actually, I know one of the biggest competitions coming up for OLI chemistry, not to wear competitive to CMU or anything, but this Chem 101 product, that's one of its big selling features, is it's kind of an integrated in-class clicker thing. And so then one thing they take advantage of there is then it's not just clicker questions. Any question that of the type they support can be that kind of, have the class do it, look at the answers.
So that's a great point to bring up that I might actually consider for an upcoming community meeting, which is, we're talking about design tools now, but maybe the next one or one in the near future should be around delivery and what capabilities we'd like to see in terms of when you're delivering an OLI course and how to integrate it more in your classroom experience.
Yeah. And just occurring to me, the K-12, I mean, that's an issue with the K-12 thing also, is there's not as much homework and out of class work there as there is in class. One of the tools that was most useful, and we're using the OLI with WestEd in K-12. The teachers want to know where their students are, and that's already, that was the most useful thing. We were giving them all sorts of other analytics too, but they're like, if that student's on page 4 and that one's on page 10, then I want to be able to pair them up, that kind of thing.
Yeah, that's some good considerations as well. I could have probably a whole meeting on K-12 capabilities as well. Thanks. So another thing I'm interested in is reporting, which is something that I feel like is usually an afterthought with a lot of systems, but do you all have any kind of, and I'm talking again about design, not reporting on, student work or anything like that, are there kinds of reports that you'd like to see to inform your designs or to inform others on how you're doing against a particular design? Or visualizations?
Now, so I'm not a content designer, but I do wish that we had the capability of looking at the universe of users of our courses rather than just individual classes in a WYSIWYG type of format. I understand we can get the data from Data Shop and analyze it, but I'd like to be able to look at a set of questions in a lesson and say, okay, these questions seem to be less useful on a global scale than the other ones, so that we can start trying to figure out, do we have to work on them or not?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think that's been a piece we've been aspiring to since the days of the terrible spreadsheets. And I think we've got a decent first pass of that in Echo. Some of those pieces have been pulled into Torus even now. And so the framework is there for those kinds of reviews and analytics on the design side. We've got a little bit of an implementation. I suspect that part of what would be really useful in accelerating that work is a crisper set of needs and of features and of specs, right? I feel like I'm often shooting in the dark and saying, okay, maybe I want to show them how many, let's show the questions that need the most amount of help to answer, or maybe I want to show them the questions that the fewest students engaged with. Understanding what the kinds of ways are that you want this information presented to you, or even, hey, if you could show me X and Y, I would be able to spend my time digging in on questions in ways A and B would be helpful. So, getting more input into what you want to see, how do we make these data actionable for you? What are the kinds of actions that you want to take? But yeah, I'm totally on board with you that needing to bounce between multiple systems to pull the data out and then try to format it and understand it is, we've been working hard to get past that. And I think Trestle positions us well for it.
I heard 2 points there. One was the process of getting the data for a course. The other one was across courses, if I understood the point correctly. And the one thing, the other thing that the question I would have there is are all courses or students in courses created equally? In other words, are some courses really aiming at a different entry level in terms of students' prior knowledge? And so would the question be, would you observe a question or a set of activities the same way given students' varied backgrounds? And I think that might be a complexity at looking at things across courses, perhaps, unless those are all, you can assume that those are sort of, students are expected to come in with this background skills, these background skills and knowledge. I think it's a question that I have actually.
And in some cases, when we are looking at the second year course, French 2 versus people coming in from French 1, that's the sort of questions we can answer with this tool, where we can say, okay, French 1 students taking French 2, are they having problems with certain aspects that they should have learned in French 1?
Got it. I remember one scenario that comes to mind, which is what this brought to mind for me, where the OLI course was aimed at external students at a community college, and another version of the course was aimed at CMU students. And so there was an acknowledged variation in students' backgrounds, even though some of the same course was being delivered across both student cohorts. So that's where I think maybe complexity of students' background knowledge and skills and your ability to make conclusions about it at that holistic view might be more complex. I don't know.
It's yeah, you're right on there, Judy, and it's one of the things that Data Shop has allowed us to do. Say, look, we create a data set of all of the community college students using using French 1, and then look at that data set discretely. Figuring out ways. So I think getting all of the data for a course package, show us all of the data for French 1 inside Torus or even in Echo is relatively straightforward. And we already have some of those capabilities. What we don't have are great ways for splitting that data out into appropriate sub-communities of learners. I think that we'll be able to, so because we're going to also have better capabilities in Torus for capturing meta information about our users, we should be capable of making those subsets and being able to drill into those different learner populations. At least the information's there, which we don't always have in legacy OLI. Knowing what the right set of distinctions to make is sometimes hard. And Judy, what you described, which in some ways is probably the better question, how do we create a set of capabilities that are based on demonstrated prior knowledge or demonstrated need, and not on proxies for those, which is why we're saying, oh, give me the community colleges or give me the four-year publics. Can we, from early engagement with the activities, use this as a measure of saying, all right, show me learners that are like this one and show me how they, the sets of questions they succeeded or failed on. Like, that's really interesting stuff. And I think one of the Data Shop team is being tasked with working closely with the Torus team to start thinking more about how we can start to stream data directly from Torus into Data Shop. And one of the first questions that we need to figure out there is, how do we start to account for those slices, the ability to make data sets and subsets in the way that we already can in Data Shop. And so this feeds into that. Oh, someone was just telling me that they've got a mechanism for using early. Someone was putting together a nice algorithm for using early learner performance to do some of that prior knowledge assessment, and it's had some pretty good impact in terms of its relatability to learning curves. And I'm not pulling it up from the memory banks right now. It's the problem with having these meetings on a Friday. But there might be some research already at work there that would help.
Somewhat related, we found that between our community college and CMU groups, there were some questions where they behaved similarly and some where they were different. The ones Sandy noticed were it looked like it was math things. If we involved logs, our students were a little better. But I'm not so sure it's correct to think that that's class-wise in terms of student-wise. Like we, at CMU, we have students that are struggling and that we don't serve as well as the ones that aren't struggling. And so variability in response, like questions that have larger variability across the population, that's a place to drill in and say, can we help the people at the lower end of that? And some questions don't need that. And so I think combining across multiple sites, even if the students on average are different, still helps both sites.
Aaron, quick question. Did you have a chance to talk a little bit about audit capabilities? And since we've got a few minutes left, and I don't know if it'd be useful to show or talk about those.
Sorry, I was muted. Yeah, I talked a little bit about the audit capabilities. I showed off actually that a little bit of Torus and those and the data. And I can go back to.
No. If you already showed up, this is my fault for showing up late. Tell me to be quiet.
No, that's okay. We didn't discuss it in depth, so it's fine to revisit it as a topic of, pointed topic to discuss. So,
Yeah, I think the larger notion here as we think about this meeting and its goal of unearthing design needs is we have these capabilities for building audits. What we talk about is the audit framework in Torus. Right now, we have implemented 2 audits, which are not perfect and not thorough, which we're going to continue to grow. And Aaron's going to show them to you, accessibility and pedagogy. But knowing that this is a framework, imagine what other kinds of design audits you might want to see in different contexts. We've talked a bit about DEI audit tools. Can we provide a first look at how inclusive the course is in terms of its language use and image use as just one example? But it feels like the space for design auditing is really wide open.
in fact, along those notes, are there different types of rubrics or audit tools out there that you use that we should consider? Inclusive language. Yeah, around more things certainly around diversity and equity and inclusion.
This occurred to me, there's a AP chemistry teacher in Boston that has a list of words that, and she teaches in schools that have a lot of non-English, not English as first language. And she has this list of words that we assume they know. Some of them are just things that are they're not related to chemistry. They're just things that are set up in problems like the contextualization of a question. And so she uses it to because it might show up on the AP exam. And so she wants her students to be ready to see them. It occurred to me a list like that during audit, like how many words are there in the OLI? How many times do those words show up in the chemistry OLI course? Even something as trivial as that, as simple as that, like just, are we using some vocabulary that only highly biased towards, people like us?
Yeah, that's interesting. And that would be, I would think, a pretty simple check, right? Just looking for words and word counts, and how much information that gives you to see that. And then some folks have put some things into the chat here. Greg, what's this link you put in there?
This is a tool called Alex that will read your just kind of any writing and flag inconsiderate or insensitive phrases or words. I don't know. I saw this a while ago. I just thought it was interesting. I've never really used it, but I keep it bookmarked.
Yeah, I've never seen that before. Thanks for sharing that. And then, yeah, we mentioned the Oscar rubric earlier as well, but thanks for providing the link. And Judy put something in here for diversity, equity, inclusion. Thank you. Yeah, sharing resources with us to consult as we're building these things out is really helpful. So we're down to 3 minutes left, and I'd like to just thank you all for this lovely discussion and lots of good information. Sounds like we're in alignment with the kinds of things we're thinking about, but you've given us even more to consider. So awesome. Thank you guys so much. I want to point you guys to this Torus community webpage. And let me get this in the chat. So, of course, it's not going to let me. I'll put this in the chat here. So that if you go to that page, if you're thinking of something as a result of this conversation and you think of it later, there is a form at the top of this page to submit ideas for Torus. So please don't hesitate to just give us any thoughts that you have. We want to hear from you as much as possible as we're building this out. So give me a second to get this webpage in a way I can share it in Zoom. But you guys have been great in terms of your discussion today. I'm sorry, I'm having a hard time getting to this.
Nancy already posted it.
Oh, thanks.
Thanks, Nancy.
Yeah, thanks, Nancy. That's great. I was fumbling around with all these Zoom controls and windows, so I appreciate that. Just keep coming to these meetings too. We want to hear from you as often as possible. And if you want to set up one-on-one meetings to do a deep dive into any of these things that we've discussed today or in previous meetings, don't hesitate to reach out to me or anyone on our team at OLI. You can write the help desk. It'll get to me one way or another. And I would love to reach out and do even one-on-one meetings or team meetings. So we're always looking to gather these requirements and make sure we're building this in a way that supports all of you. So thank you so much for your input and continued collaboration.
Thank you.
And have a great weekend, everyone.
Yeah, a good long weekend. Get some rest.
Yeah, we all deserve it, right? Thanks again, everyone.
Take care, everyone. Thanks again.